tackle that here. So, yeah, the topic looking at today is dealing with habits, skillful and unskillful habits, and how to begin to work with our mind in more effective ways, and getting to know our own tendencies. The foundation, there's an old saying from a classic text: you cannot tame the minds of others until you can tame your own. Therefore, begin by taming your own mind. Now, when I first heard that, because I grew up, my parents came from the 60s, and sort of, this movement where taming and controlling people doesn't sound like a very nice thing to do to anybody, but there's a sense in which that's what we're doing with animals. We train animals, and we do kind of train each other. We tame each other, habits that are unskillful, things we say and do that cause harm and disruption for other people. So taming the minds of others, a tame animal, for example, is often more at peace, often more comfortable, understands the sort of safe boundaries and so forth, compared to an animal that's fully wild and doesn't understand what's going on and the boundaries and the risks and so forth. So the idea, obviously, for traditional societies that grew up actually taming animals like horses and so forth, and it's very natural that everything needs to be tamed, right? So the idea of taming our own mind is recognizing that there are these wild natural impulses, these wild instinctive impulses, but getting to know a little bit what are those tendencies and how we can begin to work with them. Our neighbor, for example, got a dog, and the dog has this very sweet dog, but it has a very scary appearance and bark. Right? So we got this little device. Nowadays, you can get electronic devices that records and memorizes that dog's bark. And so when the dog barks, it plays an ultrasound thing to dissuade it from barking. It recognizes just that dog's bark and then gives it some feedback to dissuade it from barking. So it comes out, and gradually we can watch it now barking a little bit more softly, just shifting into growling. Because it's beginning to get that instant feedback. And you can see how for taming an animal, it's super important to get that instant feedback, that really fast feedback. You do something, oh, not good. Do something, oh, not good. Like if you've got a cat and you've got a spray bottle and water spray bottle to dissuade it from, okay. maybe you've got a different approach, but one way or another, if you do something, if you say something unskillful, and then 2 years later somebody says, 2 years ago when you said that thing, it really hurt my feelings. That's really hard to learn, if you've got that delayed feedback like that. So it's just one of those aspects of how to learn, is getting that feedback loop. And so part of the feedback loop that we want to begin to build is the feedback loop of watching our own mind, and like getting to know our own mind and getting more awareness, just the visibility. And that's the sort of basic ground level of what people tend to call mindfulness, is just becoming aware of what's going on in the mind. Mindfulness really means several things. It includes remembering. That's the main meaning of mindfulness. Like, be mindful enough to remember your shopping list, when you get to the grocery store, right? That's mindfulness has an implication of remembering, but it also has an implication of being cautious, but it also has an implication of being aware, and just sort of being aware of what's going on inside. So the application of mindfulness to, for example, meditation or to building habits, part of it is just being aware and being honest and openly aware of what's going on. Part of it is remembering the decisions we had made about what were skillful habits we wanted to cultivate, what were unskillful habits we wanted to overcome. And part of it is being alert to things that are leading indicators of problems, right? Like early signs we might be going off in the wrong direction. And so that latter one is technically called alertness. So often we talk about mindfulness and alertness as being, um, actually, there's three things: mindfulness, um, alertness, and conscientiousness that are the main three drivers of building good habits, and also the main three foundations for mindfulness. Again, mindfulness, that awareness and memory. Alertness is looking out for signs of trouble, like temptations or um, bad habits creeping back in, or like the bad habit of referring to them as bad habits instead of unskillful habits. Um, and then conscientiousness means the mind that really cares. Like if you're very conscientious, it means you care a lot about something. You want to do a good job. You don't want to do a bad job at something. Conscientiousness is the degree to which we think it is important. For example, the degree to which we um, think our habits are important, or watching our mind is important. Conscientiousness is kind of the foundation for all of these things, and shifting what it is that we find to be most important. Okay, so just laying some of the groundwork with those three concepts. So we can do some meditation, and as we're meditating, we can try to notice these three elements playing back and forth together. The conscientiousness part is caring about meditation, thinking it's important. I want to do this. I want to learn how to meditate. It's important that I focus my attention. For example, when we do this 3 breath practice at the beginning and I ask, what is important now? That's a cue for you for your conscientiousness to wake up and say, okay, what is important? And that's not meant to be a leading question. It's really meant to be an open question. What is important now? Because it could be a lot of things. Very much depends on you. But when you regard something as important, that's the foundation for conscientiousness. That's really what it means. It's caring about something. So, for example, caring about paying attention in meditation. Mindfulness is for example, paying attention to our breath and not forgetting or remembering it when we move away. And alertness is one example of alertness is noticing when your mind has wandered away. That's like the noticing part. Another example would be noticing if your mind is about to wander away. But normally, at our stage, you don't notice that your mind is about to wander away. You only notice like after the fact that your mind is like, wait a second, what was I doing? All right, right. But that's also still alertness. So we can try to watch for the interplay of these three minds as we go through some meditation practice. All right. So, as usual, we can begin by finding a comfortable position for our meditation. Reducing our outer distractions, partially closing our eyes, for example. Taking a deep breath in and out. And another breath, just inviting ourselves to relax, just sending that message to our body and mind. Then another breath, just asking ourselves, what is important right now? Our conscientiousness is the mind that holds, for example, virtuous states of mind to be important. So digging into this question of what is important right now, we can bring to mind, we can recall that our own experiences are not truly different from the experiences of others. What we're tasting in our own mind is just a sampling of the minds of every other being. They experience pleasure and pain, awareness, wishes, feelings. So we can ask both for ourselves and for others, is there anything more important than having a peaceful mind? Is there anything more important than having a peaceful mind oriented towards virtue? And virtue is that which makes our mind more peaceful. And what disturbs our peaceful mind are negative states of mind, negative actions, but also just disturbed, uncontrolled minds that, that disrupt our mental peace. So our conscientiousness is a mind that deeply, deeply values our own and others' virtue, inner peace, and that guards against non-virtue and the tendency towards delusions or disturbed states of mind. We think of how we cherish money, for example. We guard against its loss. We cherish our friends and family and pets and so forth. We guard against anything that would harm them or damage our relationship. So in the same way, we cherish our own and others' inner peace and virtuous states of mind. And we guard against our own and others' negativity and deluded or disturbed states of mind. And with that deep belief that our inner peace, virtuous states of mind are important, we can bring our attention to our breathing as a way to practice our mindfulness. Mindfulness means bringing our attention to a chosen object like our breath and holding it without forgetting and thereby preventing distraction. So this is mindfulness. Paying attention to our breath is an aspect of being mindful of our body. The body never disappears, the breath never disappears, but our mind can wander away. These things can disappear from our mind. And so we use mindfulness to prevent this, to keep the awareness of what is present. And if we notice that our mind has wandered off to something else, this is part of our alertness. Alertness is this watchfulness in the mind. Our alertness signals us to return to our breathing. It is our conscientiousness that drives our wish to meditate, that sense that it is important to gain control of our own mind. It is our mindfulness that keeps our mind tied to its object, in this case, our breath. And it is our alertness that guards against or becomes aware of faults such as distractions and alerts the rest of our mind. And it is important that as we practice this, that while we take it seriously, we don't take it too seriously. We make sure to enjoy. And so if we notice any sense of increased relaxation or peace, we just focus on that feeling of enjoyment for a little bit. Then we can bring to mind our friends, family, those who've been kind to us in our life, teachers, mentors, benefactors. We develop a feeling of warmth and gratitude for them. And we can develop a wish to repay the kindness of others by building our own wisdom, peace, compassion. And with this good motivation, we can open our eyes and rise from our meditation. So this is some introduction to how these three parts of the mind work together. It's conscientiousness and mindfulness and alertness. And when we talk about parts of the mind, one traditional term is mental factors. And so if you remember back to math class, whenever that was, a factor is something you can that forms part of a bigger whole. So you can take a number like 24 and you can factor it into 3 and 8, or you can take 8 and factor it into 2 and 4 and so forth. Breaking it down, what are the component parts? So mental factors are these parts of mind that make up the whole of our mind. And there's this really strong tendency for us to just think, I'm like this, and I do this, I want this, and I think this, and so forth. But technically, when you say I want this, what that actually means is that there is a wish or a desire in your mind, and you are identifying with that desire. So there's a wish, and then you think that wish is me, right? So we've talked about this before about how flexible our sense of identity is. So right now, I am touching myself, or I am touching my hand, right? But at that point, I'm identifying I with this finger. The I is this finger, and the hand then is it's my hand, it's a possession. And now I am touching my arm. At that point, I am identifying with this hand. And it's a very simple example, but it basically shows that this boundary between mine, between other, and mine and I is quite flexible. So, for example, I have here a genuine piece of cardboard. And with this piece of cardboard, I am going to touch the microphone stand. So I touch the microphone stand. Now, at that point, I was basically using this to extend myself. That piece of cardboard then became an extension of myself. And with that, I touched the microphone stand, right? But technically, it was the cardboard that touched it. Or technically, it's my hand that touches it. And so this boundary between that which is other, that which is my, and that which is me is very fluid. Why am I mentioning this? Is because there's this strong tendency for us to acquire stuff. And what that means is all the stuff that used to be other, like I didn't used to know anything about, marketing, for example, but now I know a lot about marketing because I've acquired this knowledge, right? And then it becomes part of us. And so our minds are really an accumulation of so many ideas that we've come up with, but mostly all have come from others, but also feelings and wishes, and they all play together as this huge, complex tapestry. It's like a mosaic, and like a mosaic tile, this shaped tile, that shaped tile, many, many different shapes of tiles. They all together make up our mind. When we think I want, it solidifies that wish, right? And there's this very strong tendency, I want, I need, but if you just think, there's a wish in this mind, it creates a little bit of a distance. And you can even have this sense like, this strange wish. Um, um, I've given the example before, but a friend of mine who wanted to quit smoking, um, he he was literally scheduled to become a monk, and he thought, I can't remain a smoker and become a monk. Like, it just feels too much mental incongruity. So he realized that he identified very strongly with being a smoker. And so what he did is, and every time he tried to quit in the past, he was always thinking, I'm a smoker, so I want a cigarette, right? But within that, there is a wish, right? There's just a wish in his mind. There's a craving for a cigarette. And there is also an idea in his mind that a cigarette would be good, would reduce his anxiety and so forth. There's a lot going on. So what he did is he began to tease that apart. And the first thing he focused on was his identity. And he realized that when he would quit and when he would give in to that wish, the problem was that he thought he was a smoker. So of course, smokers always go back to smoking, right? Because that's what they do. You can't be a smoker and not smoke, right? Where you, so every time he would give in to that craving, he would smoke, and that would reinforce that identity. I'm a smoker. But what he did is he began to undo it from the very inside out. He thought, okay, I'm not a smoker. But here is this wish to smoke. I'm not going to deny there's a wish to smoke in my mind. And sometimes that wish would become really strong for him, and he would follow it, and he would actually smoke a cigarette. But he held to that new sense of identity and that sense, I'm not a smoker, but I am smoking a cigarette right now. That's a little funny, right? What's a non-smoker doing smoking a cigarette? Well, all right, okay, well, I've had that, done with that. But that was a little bit incongruous, right, for a non-smoker to have a cigarette. So as opposed to having that cigarette being a confirmation that he was a smoker and that his willpower was insufficient. Because what happens when you give in to that, you have a wish to not smoke, but you give in to it, it reaffirms that identity. I'm a smoker. And it also reaffirms the sense, my willpower is not strong enough to resist this craving. And it reaffirms this belief that this craving is irresistible and overwhelming, right? And so you come back to this belief system that is, I'm a smoker. This craving for smoking is irresistible, and my willpower is too weak. And therefore, I'll just have another one later, right? But he tackled this not from the outside, like he would continue smoking, but he would, or sometimes he would smoke, but he would think, I am a non-smoker, just had a cigarette. Okay, apparently that craving was really strong, but it was incongruous with my identity. But it's almost at that point, he wasn't thinking, I want to smoke. He's just thinking this really strong wish to smoke, right? So you see this very subtle, it's a little bit subtle, right? But there's this distinction between thinking of ourself as wanting this and doing this and having a certain identity versus being able to change the identity. And so what he did is, even as he was gradually giving, occasionally giving in to this and so forth, he focused on changing that identity. I'm a non-smoker. I'm a non-smoker, non-smoker. And gradually his behavior became in line with that. And it trailed away, faded away, that wish to smoke. So this is all, so these mental factors like conscientiousness is this mind that just cares deeply. I made a bit of a mistake when I was guiding the meditation, and I said, we need to take this seriously, but not too seriously. We need to enjoy also. But afterwards, I thought that's not quite the right way to phrase it. We need to take our meditation practice very, very seriously, right? And it's not that we don't want to take it seriously, but we need to be skillful and not heavy about it, for example. And so we need to be and skillfulness includes ample enjoyment. Like if you're conscientiousness is a mind that takes something seriously. I believe in certain conduct as being the right way to act. I believe meditation is important. I believe it's important for me to guard my mind. All of that is conscientiousness. But just know from our own experience, when something's like really heavy and really strict and really stiff and so forth, then it gets very uncomfortable. It gets painful, right? But skillfully training our mind involves ample use of enjoyment, right? Like ample use of relaxation, peace, encouraging ourselves. And you think about the difference between, but this really fits cleanly with this idea of skillfulness versus unskillfulness. Now, I can use that term, skillful versus unskillful, but what exactly is skillful? What exactly is unskillful? Well, that's that's an infinitely complex discussion, right? Because it very much depends on the circumstances. There are some general rules and patterns, but you think about what's a skillful way of raising a child, versus unskillful. Well, it's super nuanced, right? It's like every interaction, like, oh, that was a little bit unskillful, or that was very skillful. Do you understand? If you're too heavy with a child, right, they're going to end up being a bit, potentially different, but different cultures obviously skew different ways. But for our modern culture, we tend to be recognizing that being too heavy is problematic. You can traumatize the person, and they're very afraid to take any chances or experiment. But if you're too lax, right, they're untamed, they're wild, right? So taming our own minds is a little bit like that. Again, you can't tame the minds of others until you tame your own. You think about a parent who doesn't have good control over their own reactions, who doesn't have control over their own, for example, substance use, or their own way of speaking, or how they deal with stress, or their own finances. Of course, what will their children learn? It'll be very hard for the children to learn skillful ways to, you know, use or not use substances, skillful ways to manage finances, manage speech, manage anger, and so forth. So you cannot tame the minds of others until you can have tamed your own. We think we need to build this skillfulness working with our own mind. And we're basically out of time. But again, I've now finished reading this book, Atomic Habits, that I talked about for a long time. I really do like the book. I like the general framing as well as all the practical tips that they have in there. So it's kind of a wealth of advice on how to skillfully build habits, and how to skillfully undo bad habits. So I'll refer you to that for for more details, just in the interest of keeping to our time commitment. But why don't we close briefly just by again rewarding ourselves for having the discipline to have shown up for the meditation class. We give ourselves a little virtual pat on the back, and absorb for a couple of minutes in meditation, just with a sense, even through this brief time together, right? 45 minutes or so. What we have done is we have reaffirmed our own commitment to learning and training in meditation. We have built and strengthened some community here, and that community helps to reinforce not only our own habits, but the habits of everybody else who's participating. And we have deepened our familiarity with some of these core concepts, like the difference between self and mine and other, and how fluid that is, and how we can change our identity, and how we can begin to recognize the constantly changing flow of mental factors, wishes, beliefs, desires, that they come and they go, they grow strong, they grow weak. But because they are changing all the time, it is exactly for that reason that we can sculpt our own mind. We can tame and train our own mind. Because it is changing all the time, we can change it in a more useful, more skillful direction. Just hold this belief. we hold a determination that while we're out of meditation, we want to continue watching our mind, continue watching all of these movements, both skillful and unskillful, just getting to know. And then we can think how powerful and how wonderful it would be if we could really truly tame our own mind. Then how much power would we have to help others to find more skillful ways to navigate their own lives, their own experience. Then we can open our eyes and arise from our meditation. Thank you, everyone, very much.